Welcome back, everyone, to the Disaster Tough podcast, where we share insights into the big plays and right calls of leadership. We dive deep into the stories, lessons learned, and ideas that will help you in the field. Let's go.
Welcome back to the Disaster Tough podcast. I'm your host, John Scardina. I'm so excited for this week's episode. You know, there has been a ton of media around executive protection. We have been kind of on that kick lately. We've been trying to dive into interoperability, how to overcome silos. I was talking very briefly to Kevin before this podcast started about that. I'm hoping to hear his insights. He's an author. He works at a Fortune 50 company. He's obviously a professional in executive protection. He really has such an incredible background from all different types of law enforcement. We'll get into that. Former Secret Service, a former police officer, and obviously now working in the corporate world to do that executive protection. So he definitely has a span of understanding. Want to hear his insights. So with that, we'll say, Kevin, welcome to the show.
John, I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
So hopefully I did you justice there, a little bit of a pun about your background. For the sake of everybody who is tuning in, I mentioned you're an author. You just wrote an article, for example. Can you talk about a little more about the things that you're passionate about?
I'm really passionate about my farm, to be honest with you. But with work-related stuff, I'm very passionate about executive protection and advancing the executive protection career field into a more recognized professional field as opposed to what it is now. So what I do primarily is I write a lot of articles trying to educate the general public, and I'm a member of the Board of Executive Protection Professionals, and I'm currently assisting with hundreds of other people writing the American National Standard Institute standard for executive protection for the United States. And for those that don't know, there is no standard for executive protection. And we're trying to unify the career field and make it universal across all 50 states as opposed to what it is now. So that's a big lift, and it's a lot of what I'm doing currently.
It's interesting that you talk about there's no standard. I was at the National Sports Security Conference just a couple weeks ago, and they're addressing that there's really no standards in safety and security for stadiums, and they're trying to overcome that. In emergency management, there's definitely been no standards. The readiness lab, we've been trying to address that. There is a huge difference between professionals and like professional field or professionalizing a field. I think it's interesting that you're bringing that up. I think from my side of the house, probably a lot of listeners would be surprised to hear that there's no standards, right? Or like the standards would be all over the place because, since the beginning of time, you've had, kings and presidents and executives, and people need to be protected. Can you walk through why maybe standards weren't created? What were some of the gaps or some of the reasons why that was holding back, and why now you're focusing on it so much?
I think at the very beginning of executive protection commercially in the United States, and I want to go back to like the late 60s, early 70s, it was such a small niche that nobody really paid attention to it. And mostly that field was filled with like police officers, people like that, people with guns, kind of. And then in the 70s, it started to kind of getting some legs to it. Gavin DeBecker is a great example. The Vance International is another great example. Those companies kind of started. And then it started kind of professionalizing a little bit, but still small circle, small group. And to be honest, nothing really happens in any industry without money. So I see over your right shoulder a FEMA thing. A lot of people in the private sector copy or mirror federal programs in what they do. So, for example, if there's a stadium security, they want to model that after an existing program that is a federally funded or backed or tested program. Okay, so that's kind of what happened in the 70s. People were kind of mirroring the Secret Service, but they were doing so in a very odd way. So there's a saying that I like to use: just because I went to a magic show, it doesn't make me a magician. So
Awesome.
I see it, I copy it, but I don't understand it.
Yeah.
And then what happened was we had a couple wars. And so we had 2 very long wars, and people coming out of that field, out of the military, they were looking for a place for home, something that they were comfortable with, that they could do easily, and that they were good at.
Right.
Well, military security is not the same as private sector security, and it's definitely not the same as the Secret Service. So a lot of people that were coming out of the military started making their own security companies, but they really weren't modeling them after any program. They were modeling after PSD details that they used to run in the sand. And that may or may not be a good thing. That's high-speed stuff in the desert, lots of guns, lots of jumping out of trucks. But realistically, that doesn't apply itself in the private sector in America.
Sure.
So there were a lot of mistakes that were being made. There still are a lot of mistakes being made. So there's been a cry from the industry for a while now, over 10, probably 15 years, asking for some type of standard that everybody can look to and say, hey, this is what the way we should be doing this. And we should all get on board, because if we don't, we're running the risk of not being a professionally acknowledged career. Like nurses, doctors, police officers, everybody else has standards. Executive protection does not have a standard. They don't.
The L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio solves problems and is specifically designed for emergency services. How do we know? We field tested it with medical, urban search and rescue, and collapse and confined structures. This radio is amazingly tough. Check out the L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio at l3harris.com right now. How do you spell Doberman Emergency Management? EOP, OEP, HVA, HMP, Thyra, TTX, Drone, PDA. Whenever you need an expert, Doberman Emergency Management field experts are there for support. Contact an expert at DobermanEMG.com today.
CBRNE Convergence, the world's largest conference for the non-conventional threat, is heading back to Orlando between October 28th and 30th, 2024, with 3 days of workshops, lectures, and interactive sessions delivered by speakers from around the world on the latest issues and approaches to CBRNE and hazmat. Make sure to claim your early bird discount by registering now at cbrneworld.com/event/Orlando.
So I'm sorry, I talked a lot there. Go
No,
ahead.
I actually love that. In fact, I could probably take your words verbatim of what I've said about my field in emergency management. Like, I no discredit to anybody who's obviously served in the military or fire or police or whatever.
Not at all.
It is a different skill set to do from what they did to what you're doing. At the same time, the amount of retired or former whatever that get into emergency management that don't have the skill set to be strategic, it's a strategic job, has really, I want to say, damaged the field. But, you know, you get everything from a doomsday prepper with no training whatsoever, or you get somebody who's so tactical that they don't know how to be strategic. And you can take the tactical, and if you learn the strategic, phenomenal. But there has to be a process to create those standards. The same thing with the military and executive protection. I'm sure you're going to mirror this. It's great that they were, jumping out of trucks in the sand, but to move over, there has to be a new skill set learned. How do you, if you're working on standards, because this is the problem I've been dealing with, is, okay, I don't want to discredit your past experience, but I know it's not this new thing. What is the process to go from that to this? Are you guys working on that process as well?
Yeah. It's fortunately for us, the people that started this, and I'm going to throw some people under the bus here, a guy named James Cameron, he had the foresight to think, hey, we need to get as many people involved in this process as possible, because without a collective of people, this standard is going to be viewed as an individual's idea, as opposed to a career field's idea. So there are quite literally hundreds of people participating in this, and nobody's opinion is above anybody else's opinion. The problem that I saw immediately in this industry is it's very cliquey, and there was already, before I even got into this program after I retired, there was already an established group of people that were actively saying they were going to do this, but they never got around to doing it. Or to be honest with you, there was no money in it.
Yeah.
There is no money. Standards there's nothing to it. It from what I can tell, it's a money drain. We keep putting money into it with nothing coming out. But it's very needed. And so we're getting pushback from little groups of people that they don't want it because it's going to impact them later somehow. And I'm sure they've thought of a reason how this is going to impact them negatively, but I can't think of anything but positive out of this. So we get a lot of training academies that are probably going to have to change their curricula a little bit. Some of them a lot. And then we have industry people that, because they weren't part of the club to begin with, or they didn't participate, they're throwing rocks just because they're not playing, and it's unnecessary because we invited everyone. We hope at the end of this process, we know actually at the end of this process, the standard is almost done, that it is going to impact the field very much in a positive way. It's going to provide guidance. It's going to provide tons of tested experience that is going to support programs, policies, procedures well into the next 20, 30 years for this career field. And I'm very much looking forward to it.
Again, this is not the direction I was expecting to go, but this is like the thing that I've been like ringing everybody for like the last couple of years on the podcast or otherwise is, there is definitely a group who's pushing back on either wanting to standardize or have made that claim forever that, we're gonna lead this through. Mm-hmm. Man, I'm dealing with the exact same thing. For the field, it's only good. My thing is, and I bet you have a lot of these same thoughts. If I Google firefighter, if I Google police officer, accountant, doctor, whatever, and you look at images, you'll get the same thing over and over and over and over again. But if you look at emergency management, you get everything from 72-hour kit all the way through, hey, I'm in a wildfire dealing with strategic coordination, through active shooters. It is so all over the place. Nobody knows exactly what it is. And my really big problem is if we as a field can't define what it is, there's no way the stakeholder who is hiring us is going to trust us to be able to know what we do, right? You'll always be dismissed if the person who is hiring you can't define what you do. Dismissed with money and your budget, dismissed with prioritization, dismissed with, accountability, dismissed with the intelligence that's being provided as professionals. And one of the problems is, and you might have the same problem, you might not, but is if I go in there, I have 2 degrees, I've been in a bunch of jobs, I've been, I get a master class from people like you every week. When I go in there and provide an assessment, we provide the data and analytics, but I also provide my opinion. And that's based off of all of the above, right? But if the person who's listening to that doesn't think that there's anything backing that up, they're going to think, that's just your idea. Like, nobody cares, and they don't want to focus on it because nobody wants to focus on the worst day of their life, right? And so we have such probably a correlation of everybody who's pushing back on it. The only thing that I can come up with, and I'm talking too long here, is the real reason why they don't want a standard is they're afraid they're not going to meet the mark, and somehow they're going to be pushed out of it.
And honestly, there are people that aren't going to meet the mark. That's a real thing.
Yeah, and just like in school, right? I mean, you have your A performers and the people who drop out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a lot to unpackage, but everything you just said is parallel with what we're doing. I'll give an example. Bodyguards that are standing on doors right now in West Las Vegas identify themselves as executive protection professionals. Okay, good. As a term. All right. People that are jumping out of trucks with M4s in Algeria right now identify themselves as executive protection professionals. people that are in corporate America that are covering the CEO of some Fortune 10 company or something identify themselves in the same way. The gamut for who identifies as that is so wide. It is crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. But if they're going to do that, if we're going to do that as an industry, we have to collectively all have the same knowledge. We have to have the same knowledge base. If you choose to stand on a door, that's fine. More power to you. But if you're going to get certified as an executive protection professional, you better have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do that. Okay?
Yeah.
The other thing you said, which is fascinating to me, is masterclass. That is a term that is used in our industry so widely that every time I see it, I run from it.
Oh, no.
because whenever somebody says it's a masterclass, typically it's given by somebody who has pumped themselves up in the industry on social media. And it's not really a master class. It's something to get money.
That's hilarious.
I just, whenever I see that term, I'm like, no, thank you. I'd rather pass on that and keep my wallet. So
you're a funny guy because, before we start recording, you're like, hey, you push back on expert and you want to use professional, which I appreciate. Shows how humble you are. You push back on master class versus, trying to understand the root causes of things. It's fun to think about the epidemiology of words, right? Like, what do these things mean? I did sales maybe, oh my gosh, that's embarrassing, 20 years ago. I'm getting older, this is a problem. I did sales 20 years ago, and everybody there was a specialist. And at the time, when I was, 18 or whatever, I was looking at the word specialist, and I would think like, oh, that means something elevated. Now that word means nothing to me. Specialist, and even in government, specialist is typically the lowest ring on. So are you really specialized in something? So we use a lot of words that don't really mean what we think they mean, unfortunately. But
I hate the word expert personally. I challenge you, if you're on LinkedIn, I challenge you to go on LinkedIn, look up any former Secret Service guy, and see the word expert in their title or their definition of who they are, because we just don't do that. No one is an expert in executive protection. We're professionals. That's it.
Let's be, well, I'll share a funny story, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, but every time, so I work with a lot of different stadiums. I work with a lot of different corporations as on the other side of the house, on the Doberman side, with assessments and everything. And as soon as I hear that somebody had worked in the Secret Service or FBI, I know that they only want to work with people who are previously in the Secret Service or FBI. The good old boy network is very strong with those guys. So I've learned to speak the language. I've got to go. But there was a moment maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I can get kind of riled up, and I've been accused of being arrogant. This is probably true, to be honest. But
we're in the same boat.
Yeah, there was a location, would be really cryptic here, that we were working with, and the person was I think former FBI, and that guy kept on calling himself an expert. He walked around like he was, God in flesh of security, and he ended up disrespecting somebody on my team. And like, probably the worst thing you can do is be rude to somebody I work with. So, me being the boss and also being pretty arrogant, I wrote a pretty scathing email that broke down to him and his entire team, like in rapid fire, like the top 50 things that I noticed that they were just incompetent. That like would have been the basics for me. And I've learned that's not a very good approach since then. So never make that mistake again. However, there, even people like me, like I've been around the block for a little while, so I've fallen into the trap of thinking like I know a thing or two. I'm very lucky now because the people who I work with, the people who I hire, are very good at their jobs. They're probably much better in many aspects and in many ways. And that's one way to kind of keep that humility for you and working in your space. You have to understand this. I'm talking a while again here, but when you're dealing with your stakeholders, they have to trust you as a professional, i.e. an expert. I know you hate that term, But don't you want the person who's hiring you for their own protection to think that you're an expert?
I do. To your point, though, about flocking together, it's been my experience that people in the government tend to flock together because they've suffered the same pain. So in the Secret Service, it is literally a hard job. And guys respect each other on the job because they did the same that they did. You know, they know, and they know what that pain is like. I have some great friends at the FBI. I have some even better friends in the State Department. We all have shared experiences. We all have similar experiences. And I quite honestly bust on the FBI every other day. If I miss a chance daily to talk badly about them, I did something wrong. But it's the FBI, so they're the big dog in the government. And again, I have great friends on the job, but we all do things differently. I've learned specifically State Department and the FBI do protection differently than the Secret Service does during this process of working on the ANSI standard. And I won't hire somebody just because they're Secret Service. There are guys in the Secret Service that I don't want working with.
Yeah,
because I know them.
Yeah, it's every industry, right?
Right. Yeah. So if it's a good person, I'm gonna look for good people. It doesn't matter what they don't even have to be in the federal government. They could be from the private sector and work their way up. But you can usually identify who walks the walk and who actually has been there, done that, as opposed to a lot of people in this industry that it's all smoke and mirrors. They talk a big show, but at the end of the day, they really don't know what they're talking about.
In the Emergency Management Response for Dynamic Populations course, you'll master the art of managing large, diverse populations, like those at schools, hospitals, amusement parks, or stadiums. These scenarios demand rapid, adaptable responses where command and control, evacuation, mass care, medical transport and triage, public messaging, and counter-Sebring considerations are all put to the test. From October 22nd through 24th in Pueblo, Colorado, you'll dive into DIPOP training with the capstone Hot Mess Express exercise, taking on the role of an emergency manager as you lead your organization through chaos of a catastrophic train derailment. This high-intensity experience will push your skills to the limit as you work to protect and coordinate these ever-changing populations. Get ready to elevate your readiness in the most complex dynamic environments with DIPOP 2024. Class size is limited. Sign up today at thereadinesslab.com.
So help me with that one, because I think the last time I saw it, we had something like 60 to 70% of our listeners are within the 7 years of their career. Now, that career could be after being a firefighter, after being in the military, because it doesn't necessarily mean they're young as a professional. However, how can you identify that? If somebody's like, okay, I'm in a hiring position now, I want to hire great people, I really haven't been in that position before. What are some of the skill sets that you look for that smoke and mirrors versus have actually done the job?
Yeah, so in this position, there's one question that I ask, and I don't want to say that question during.
That's hilarious.
But
you won't tell me the question? That's funny.
During the interview process, when I'm talking to a prospective applicant, there's one question I ask, and that question is very specific. And if they know what they're talking about, they're going to answer that question in a very specific way. The last time that I was on an interview process panel, I was just a participant. I don't hire these people. And that's what I did. I asked that question of 3 or 4 prospective applicants that made it all the way through the process. And everybody gave a different answer except for one person. And that person answered it correctly. That was a person I knew that I wanted personally to hire. I didn't really have the final choice, but that was my recommendation. Again, people that know, like there's a saying, you don't know what you don't know. People that do know. And they can articulate it in a way that shows that they know.
100%. After we're done recording, you got to tell me what that question is. That'll be
sure. I'll throw it out. Just don't give it up.
Yeah, I won't. That's funny. What is your favorite kind of cookie? Well, the favorite kind of no, that's interesting to think about. We do a course called Emergency Management Response for Dynamic Populations. And in that course, we go over CBRN, evacuation, security, medical transport and triage, mass care, public relations, or how to talk to media, and like one other one. And the course is really special because of kind of what we're doing. Like in October, we're literally blowing up a train, which is going to be pretty fun.
Oh, that's cool.
But what the course is kind of different in a lot of other ones is the 6 instructors teach and the keynote speakers have all really done the job. And so when they get up there, one guy, Steve Johnson, he is a colonel in the British Army. He's the head of counter CBRN. The guy has he's a PhD. He's also a police officer. He's done everything under the sun. And he's probably the most deadly person on the earth because of his CBRN knowledge, truly. And yet he's one of the coolest, most humble, most kind people you ever meet. And when he talks about this is the differentiator for me. When he talks and when the other instructors talk, they explain it in a way that anybody with no understanding or with a ton of understanding can feel involved. It is such an incredible skill set to be able to do that. The reality is, like, from my world, is the people who talk a big game typically can't explain things simply. Funny enough, like there's a definition out there for what emergency management is from this group that I loathe. And the definition is like 3 paragraphs long. And in the middle of it, they're having to explain what the first paragraph means in the second paragraph. It's by a bunch of people who really haven't done the job. Versus somebody else, I saw a definition, it was a single sentence. And I thought that single sentence perfectly understood what our skill set was. And that's the big one for me. But
yeah, so one of the things in the Secret Service they teach you is to, which has always helped me in my life in every aspect of it, is to be able to communicate effectively to any person in any circumstance, whether it's somebody that doesn't speak your language or to an executive, the President of the United States, or to somebody standing on a door in a hallway or a janitor, and you just need their help. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and all of those people have jobs, and all of those jobs impact what I do. So if I can't communicate effectively from the bottom to the top, then I'm not doing my job effectively.
Man.
And so communication is key to this. I try really hard to be humble. I really do. Sometimes I come across kind of scathing sometimes, because some of the things I see are just so egregious. I have to recognize that. But that being said, I always try and educate on the back end. So even if I don't agree with you, I still want you to understand where the platform I'm coming from, how I can benefit you in the future and make things better for you, so that next time this happens, you come from you're in a better position to understand not only where I'm coming from, but you have the education and knowledge and background to actually do something about it. Okay. Not just me saying, hey, keep that door open for a reason. You understand why that door has to be open. You understand why you're there. You understand why I want you there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And in fact, that's a great leadership skill that I think people sometimes miss out on. Not from the leader perspective, but or more from the follower. Somebody can really beat you up by what they're saying, and sometimes that's required. But if you can be humble enough to hear what they're actually saying, whether they're beating you up or not, and then hear the next part, because really great leaders typically can cut things to the bone to help people be humble enough to listen. It's the next part that's critical, that follow-up of saying, hey, this is why. The why part is very important.
And I am by no means a great leader, trust me on this. But when I'm in the position to lead, it's usually in a positive way. I want people to understand, and that's the way it was in the service also. I want people to get it first, and then we can talk about it later, but I want them to understand what I'm trying to tell them. You were talking about emergency management, and it made me think of something that on the job that is, I think it's a critical skill. One of our former directors came up with this, not me, and it's called the 5-minute game. Yeah. and I'd like to pass it on to your listeners if I could. It's basically a game where no matter what happens, the first 5 minutes of anything, whether it's a critical incident, you're responding to something, it doesn't matter what it is, or you're just taking a post on a door in a hallway and there's no one around. Take the first 5 minutes of whatever time that you have and think of every possible bad thing that can happen to you. Everything, ninjas, hurricanes, earthquakes, the cleaning lady walking up to you, whatever it is. Think of everything bad that could possibly happen to you in that one particular circumstance and think about how you're going to respond to it. Okay? Right. If it's an emergency management, you're riding out to a scene of a chemical spill or something. What is the first 5 minutes of that going to look like? Because the first 5 minutes is going to determine whether it's a success or a failure. It is. Yeah. You're going to show up and you better have a plan. So that game is designed to help people. It's a mental skill to help people think, hey, what do I do from right here? How can I make things better? How can I support this? How can I make a positive impact on my job right now in 5 minutes? And just think about it. It's only 5 minutes. Just think about it for 5 minutes. After that, you can go back to whatever it is you think about, what's for dinner, but give us 5 minutes at least.
I like that. In fact, and I'm looking at the time here. I know we're closing up. It reminds me of my mentor, who, in every sense of the word, is an expert. So he gets that title. He's influenced emergency planning for the last 40 years globally. The guy is incredible. Also, not an A-type personality, which is fascinating to think about. And he probably wouldn't call himself an expert, but he is. He would always say when we got out to a hurricane or we got out to some huge type 1 catastrophic response, he would always say, as soon as you get behind the ball, you never get in front of it. And he was just so incredible about understanding at every moment in time, not only cascading impact, but all the things that would impact a cascading impact and would cause a cascading impact. And his planning was not only simple, it was just so honed in at all times. And he would do that. He would think about, okay, this would cause that. And talk about a chess player in the truest sense.
Yeah, proactive beats reactive 9 times a day and twice on Sunday. So you can't be more proactive. And we're in a career field where both of us are, where being proactive is necessary for success.
Okay, so we're 31 minutes in before I asked you about this. I'm pretty impressed with myself because I know everybody wants me to ask you about it. You're talking about standards, your former Secret Service, and there was an assassination attempt on former president that has been in the media a lot. At the time of this recording, you've had people resign. There's hearings mostly for political, people to get more votes because who cares about them. But from like the safety and standards perspective, what are your insights on what happened at that rally?
I've been talking about this online all week. I've been knocking down trolls all week with this issue. First and foremost, the agents that were working that day did a phenomenal job. I was a former instructor in the Secret Service. I was on 2 presidential details. I know people that were on that stage, and I know the deputy director that testified and the director that testified in front of Congress. And there is a lot of pundency going on with the political, like you said, the political aspect of it. I don't appreciate people trying to get a 5-minute soundbite going after people in the Secret Service. That bothers me personally. But I appreciate Deputy Director Rowe's response to that in supporting his people because he's absolutely correct. The people that were on that stage today did absolutely the right thing. They got him down behind cover. They medically evaluated him quickly. They communicated with our counter sniper teams until the problem was down. Once the problem was down, they moved him effectively and securely to secure vehicles and then took him to emergency care. All of those things are planned. It was practiced. Everybody that was on that stage knew their job. They all did it extremely well and very fast. I wish that there was a clock on those agents that responded to him from the back of that stage. I can't even tell you how fast that was. The counter sniper team was perfect. One shot, In the history of the United States, no counter sniper team has ever killed anyone, ever.
Yeah.
And no one has ever talked about that. But it was
I
one
didn't realize
bullet.
that.
Yeah, it was one bullet through the face of an individual at that distance, and the person was laying down next to a gun. That shot was amazing. But that shot stopped several people from that crowd from dying. Several. He had plenty of ammo. A lot of other people would have been killed, injured, or whatever. And the president may have been shot again. Okay, but this counter sniper took care of the problem. Now there's a whole bigger issue here with the design and plan of that event, and I, like most of my colleagues, are waiting for the FBI report to come out, which will identify what the problem is. A lot of people have alluded to it. There is a lot of counter finger pointing going on now from police unions and folks like that. But I can assure you that the Secret Service in their planning model communicated with local police departments on their roles, duties, responsibilities, and if their leadership did or did not pass that down, that's something that needs to be addressed. But everybody knew their job that day. Some people did it better than others. I have a lot of questions about why that guy was walking around without anybody talking to him for an hour outside of our perimeter. And I'm sure the American public does too. But again, I don't know the answer to that, and I certainly am not gonna respond to that until the FBI finishes their investigation. Once that's complete, I think everyone will understand what exactly happened. Now, is the service going to take a hit? It's the FBI. Of course, they're going to take a shot at the service. They have to. There is clearly something happened there with communications, and I don't know what it is, but there was some communications failure there. Okay, because everything that I've heard, the service knew about this problem 30 seconds before it happened. That's a problem. We should have known about that a long time before that. But again, we're going to find out that information from the FBI. What I can say is, after serving 24 years in the United States Secret Service, I have not been a member of a group of people, and that this includes military and law enforcement and any other job I've ever had, that was more professional, more dedicated, and more career-centered focused, like centrally focused on their mission than the Secret Service. Everybody that I work with knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly the costs. They knew exactly why they were there, and they did it with vigor. And they came. It was the most professional place I've ever seen. Imagine working in a room with, like people ask me all the time, what was it like working in the Secret Service? And I say, imagine a room with a bunch of velociraptors in it, and somebody throws a steak in the room. That's exactly what it was like there. Everybody there is A-type squared and 100%, and they're all smart people. I'm sorry that Congress chose this week, however many days before the FBI was done to go after people in the Secret Service, but they should wait like everyone else until the FBI is done with their investigation, then address those problems. I said this in an article. Congress, some of the senators that went after Deputy Director Rowe yesterday, or the day before yesterday, they should be more concerned on why they're not budgeting that agency the way they should be, instead of taking shots, because they have the opportunity to do that. They have the opportunity to give them resources, and they don't. So it's on them. They know what the stressors are.
Their calculus is different, though, right?
Yeah.
You and I operate under a moral code, and they
Correct.
operate under both.
Yeah. It's important to understand that most of the people taking shots, though, wouldn't even qualify for the agency to begin with. So,
it's funny. I saw something on the Olympics where somebody falls off a balance beam, or somebody didn't win gold, and it cuts over to a guy on a couch who's like eating Doritos and just like, "Oh, you suck," It's like somebody could never do it. That's a good point to remember, actually, for people who like to judge other people's action. My thing is, whether it's the assassination attempt or the wildfires in Maui or the Uvalde shooting or I could go over some other high-profile incidents. No one's ever willing to say very quickly, hey, something's screwed up, and we are looking into why it's screwed up, and we're going to take actions to make sure it doesn't happen again. What I hear is a lot of people defending themselves and their actions because they get emotional too. Like, people try to beat them up for things that don't matter. I heard one senator go after Director Rose about the number of people protecting the president versus, the former president. I'm like, who cares? And they got in this huge heated exchange. It's just like, that wasn't the problem. People knew about this, about the shooter for an hour. Some people did. Other people didn't. That's a problem.
You could have literally doubled the manpower of that event, and it would not have impacted that at all.
I know the number doesn't, but again, for me, and I think for a lot of people right now, I'm kind of sick of, in every industry, in every major incident, in every situation, no one's ever able to say, I screwed up, or this something happened. We don't want it to happen again. We're looking at how to improve it. It is. The ownership thing is like really going away super fast and trying to blame everybody else.
I can assure you of this. When the FBI does come out with their report, somebody in the Secret Service is going to say that. They're going to say it publicly too. They will.
I hope they do. Yeah.
They will.
Well, the police included, right? Like, it doesn't matter about this situation. I'm just talking about in general. As a culture, we need to be able to kind of take it sometimes. And it can be something as crazy as this or as small as something else that happens. I really appreciate when my staff, I had just had to deal with it the other day. Somebody came up and said, hey, I screwed up. Let's figure this out. I take that so much better than somebody trying to not blame. So just a thought for everybody who's listening. If, how do we improve trust within our own organization or otherwise?
It's a matter of integrity. Personal integrity. And that is a very big deal in the Secret Service. So, trust me, that people will fall on their swords appropriately.
Yeah, and I'm sure they will. Like I said, I've known now many people in the Secret Service or former like yourself, and all great people that I've been able to interact with. So, Kevin, again, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me and really sharing your insights on being a professional in executive protection.
Yeah, John, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, everybody, I got to do the shameless plug. 5-star rating and subscribe. That's the best way you can tell us if you like this episode. If you learned something, please put it out on social media. Tell us what you learned. If you're in that field or you're looking to be out of the field, talk to us about it. If you have a question specifically for Kevin, you can contact us at contact@thereadinesslab.com, and we will forward that on to him. And with that, we'll see you for the next one. Peace.